Samuel Carson settled into his seat at the back of the bus, tucking his shoulder bag under his feet and draping his jacket over the aisle seat beside him. For several minutes, passengers shuffled aboard, enough to ensure that anyone wanting an empty seat next to them could find one. Once everyone settled in, they waited for the driver. Samuel slipped on his headphones and opened his CD player, inserting a disc from his case. He closed the player, and the homemade CD titled Girl Mix 1 began to spin. As Madonna's What It Feels Like for a Girl played, the driver took his place and eased the bus out of the depot. Once on the road, he introduced himself. Between songs, Samuel caught snippets, "Name is Earl, and I'll be your driver to Vancouver, for those of you continuing on." At that moment, Earl's voice faded under the smoky, smooth tones of Lou Reed urging him to take a walk on the wild side. It was going to be a long trip, 17 hours and over 1,100 kilometers. With darkness outside, Samuel turned on his overhead light to read. He pulled out a thick stack of printed papers, the first being an email he received almost a month earlier. Subject: Papers. Hello. I'll skip the niceties for now, we'll get to that later. I'm consulting on a case in Vancouver on the 14th. Let me know if you want to finalize the divorce then. I'll provide a bus ticket and a room at my hotel. Only contact me if you're serious about resolving our past issues. Attached was her next email with the ticket number and the hotel details. The rest of the stack contained stories Samuel had printed from the internet. He made sure to bring plenty of reading material to keep his mind occupied and ease his nerves. He started with one of his favorites, Consequences, by a writer known as Annie Port. By the time he decided to turn off the overhead light and pull his coat over him like a blanket, he had read the story completely. Finding sleep was a challenge, but eventually, he drifted off, the sounds of Green Day's King for a Day fading into his consciousness. Hannah sat at her desk, her 7th grade textbook open in front of her while a small radio played the new Michael Jackson song, Billie Jean. She held her pencil loosely, pointedly ignoring her homework, lost in her thoughts. Steve Check peered through the crack in her bedroom door. 2 years older, Hannah seemed so grown-up and sophisticated, almost a woman. He admired her bare legs, which were exposed as the hem of her skirt rose slightly. She was developing the soft curves of a teenager, unlike the girls in his class. Her shirt hung loosely in front as she leaned over her desk, concealing her budding figure. There was something about Hannah that made Steve feel funny, in a good way. He particularly liked looking at her legs. Standing there in the hallway, he watched her casually dismiss her homework. She was a teenager, she didn't have to do it if she didn't want to. As he stood absorbed in watching Hannah, Cinnamon, Hannah's tabby cat, brushed past him and barged into the room. Hannah turned to greet her pet when she saw Steve standing in the doorway, his face flushed with embarrassment at being caught peeking. Hannah smiled and got up. Steve wanted to run back to the couch where he was supposed to be asleep, but his legs felt frozen. She sat on her bed, looking a little flushed, and patted the spot beside her. With effort, he forced himself to walk over and take the place she indicated. Hannah placed her hand on Steve's shoulder. "You were watching me, weren't you, Stevie?" So frightened, he could only nod. "What were you hoping to see?" Steve shrugged and mumbled, "I don't know." "Do you like watching girls, Stevie? Do you think they're pretty?" He blushed, but didn't answer. "Maybe not the girls in your class, perhaps older ones?" Unable to stop himself, he nodded. "Are there any particular girls you like? Maybe a teacher or an older sister of one of your friends?" He shuffled his feet and stared at the carpet, unable to meet her gaze, biting his lower lip as he pondered his response. "Stevie," Hannah asked when the silence stretched on, "do you think I'm pretty?" Steve wanted to jump up and flee the room, but Hannah's hand felt like a lead weight on his shoulder. He fought back tears of embarrassment and nodded again instead. Hannah wrapped her arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. "Stevie, it's okay." She offered him a tissue from her nightstand to dry his eyes. Stevie, I want to share something with you, but you can't tell anyone, okay? You have to promise me. Can you do that? Intrigued, Steve wondered what could be so secret. Eager to impress her, he placed one hand over his heart and raised his other hand as he had seen in courtroom dramas. I promise, Hannah. I won't tell anyone, not even my mom. Hannah smiled at him. That's good, because I know you're a good kid, and I can trust you to keep your word. Stevie, do you know what a lesbian is? Steve thought for a moment and shook his head. You know that feeling you get when you look at a girl? When you want to hold her hand or maybe kiss her? Unsure about the last part, he nodded, knowing he liked looking at Hannah. Well, sometimes girls feel the same way about girls as you do. They're called lesbians. Are you a lesbian, Hannah? Steve guessed. I think so, Stevie. He was confused by how she could think she was a lesbian but not be sure. Still, he didn't understand it fully. Steve remembered some older boys. If Hannah was a lesbian, she probably thought like them. Jimmy's older brother had a girlfriend. He took her out to movies and dinner before driving to the river valley. Do you have a girlfriend, Hannah? Now it was Hannah's turn to blush, and Steve noticed as she turned her head away, embarrassed. No, not yet, she said. Is there a girl you like? His curiosity about this lesbian topic grew. He had never heard of anything like it. What's she like? Hannah smiled and placed her hand on his head, looking at him with a happy expression. Her name is Amber. Is Amber a lesbian too? Now she looked sad. I don't think so, Stevie. He felt crushed. He didn't want to make Hannah unhappy. Unsure of what to do, he remembered how his mom comforted him when he was sad, so he gave Hannah a hug. She smiled again, looking down at him. You're such a sweet kid, Stevie. Then she studied him for a moment and smiled wider. Stevie, would you like to dance with me? His heart leaped with joy. I would like that, Hannah. Would you do something for me in return? Samuel stretched as he stepped out of the bathroom, the morning light filtering in while the bus sped along. He returned to his seat and decided to read Story of Pris by Linda LaFrance, followed by an anonymous tale titled Cherry Tree. By the time he finished, the bus was nearing Vancouver. A city bus took him to the hotel, which featured a tall ceiling and a second-story area overlooking the lobby, similar to many other hotels he had visited. He grabbed his suitcase and approached the counter. Samuel Carson, I have a reservation. The girl typed on the computer and assigned him a room number, handing him the keycard along with a message she said had been left for him. Once Samuel got his suitcase settled in his room, he unfolded the note he had received. It read, "Meet me in the hotel restaurant at 3 o'clock." He glanced at his watch and cursed under his breath. It was already 3:10. He dashed out of his room, thankful for modern technology that allowed him to leave without stopping to lock it. He took the elevator to the first floor and hurried to the hotel's commerce area, where finding the restaurant was easy. Samuel was led to the table where his soon-to-be ex-wife was waiting. Sorry I'm late, he apologized as he slid into the chair across from her. I just got in. Rebecca looked professional, likely on a break from her consultation. Her skirt suit projected an image of crisp capability without resorting to a man's suit that might come off as hostile. Not that looking hostile was a bad thing if she was prosecuting, but today she was only consulting. Hello, Samuel. I don't have much time, so I'll be brief. I've reviewed the terms of the divorce and am ready to finally put this matter to rest. However, there's one issue that needs to be resolved. Samuel felt a wave of nerves. What could be so important that she had to bring him all the way here? Any changes to the divorce papers could be handled through his lawyer. If you've read it, you know I'm not after your money. All I want is the house in St. Albert. It belonged to my parents, and I grew up there. It felt strange for Samuel to refer to his parents in the past tense. He was barely 30, too young to be without living parents, or to have a failed marriage, for that matter. Perhaps things weren't as odd as he thought. I don't care about the house. I spend most of my time in Denver these days. Samuel sighed. I do miss the mountain air, but it just doesn't feel like home. Samuel, what I want is simple. I want to meet the woman who ruined our marriage. He stammered, that's impossible. I didn't bring her. Rebecca took hold of his flailing hands. Samuel, I can drag this out in court for years, it's what I do for a living. I know you want to finalize this so you can remarry, and I hold no ill will toward your new wife. I just want to meet Mia. You can arrange it. A heavy weight settled over Samuel, reminiscent of the burden he'd felt when he confessed his secret life to his mother after his stepfather's passing. Rebecca, I can't. Samuel, I think I deserve this. Mia drove us apart, and I've never truly met her, unless you count the time she screamed and locked herself in the bathroom in her underwear. I want closure, just like you do, and I can't get it until I've looked Mia in the eye and said what I need to say. Say it now, Rebecca. Say it to me. No, Samuel. I said what I needed to say to you back in 2002. I have to say this to Mia. If she can't face me, I won't be able to let go. Samuel took a deep breath. A part of him wasn't surprised by her words, but that part hadn't communicated with the rest of his mind. When? Rebecca smiled. Dinner tonight. She handed him a stack of papers. This should help. Steve closed the door behind him, locking it. With his mom and Mr. Carson both at work tonight, he and his new stepsister would be alone until at least 8 o'clock. Steve had eagerly accepted Hannah as his sister but still struggled to call her father Dad. He had moved past the crush he'd had on Hannah when their parents were dating and she babysat him, but now they were closer than ever. Steve always got home before Hannah. She was in high school and had a much longer walk. He decided to use the time until she returned in the best way he knew. He excitedly scampered up to her room, kicking off his shoes in the living room. He headed straight for Hannah's dresser and opened the drawer set aside for him. Thankfully, he had grown enough to catch up with her in size. When she had first convinced him to dress as a girl, her clothes had hung loosely on him, but now they fit almost perfectly. He dreaded the day he would outgrow her clothes. Steve had started wearing a dress while they danced together, with Hannah pretending he was a girl and he pretending she was his girlfriend. Eventually, Hannah began dating Amber discreetly, and Steve didn't need his alter ego, Mia, as much. But he found he missed being Mia and the ethereal feeling of a dress swirling around him as he glided gracefully across the room. He started sneaking into Hannah's room while she was out to dress up in her clothes, but on the third occasion, Hannah caught him. He broke down and sobbed, sharing how much he missed being pretty and being Mia. From that day forward, Hannah had the sister she had always wanted. They were careful to keep their secret from their parents, just as they had with Hannah and Amber's relationship. Now, instead of just dressing to dance, Steve enjoyed a range of girly experiences, coordinating outfits, learning makeup, and even a private slumber party where they dressed in nighties and stayed up all night talking and giving each other makeovers. From then on, whenever they were home alone, Steve vanished, and Mia took his place. Hannah allowed her new sister nearly free rein over her closet and even bought her a couple of new sets of underwear. What Steve sought from the drawer was his favorite bra and panty set. It was silky and pale pink, and although the shape wasn't as revealing as the more exotic styles Hannah now wore, they agreed these were more suitable for a girl of Mia's age. Slowly, Steve faded away, making room for Mia to emerge from behind the fair features of his face. She had been anticipating Hannah's arrival the entire time she picked out her outfit. Eventually, she settled on a knee-length denim skirt and a white tank top, featuring an angel crossing her fingers behind her back with a forked tail peeking out from under her robes. As she started curling her shoulder-length hair, Mia found it odd that Hannah still hadn't shown up. By the time she finished her makeup, worry began to creep in. Heading to the closet, Mia grabbed her final accessory, a pair of black boots with 3-inch heels that she had bought on sale. Unfortunately, her sister's wardrobe wouldn't do in this case. Mia's feet were simply too wide. After zipping the boots up to mid-calf, she decided to ease her concerns about Hannah with a guilty pleasure. Quietly, she crept downstairs and into the basement. Although this space felt like Mr. Carson's domain, Mia knew there was something important hidden here. She spotted an old coffee can on a shelf. Blowing on her fingers to ensure her nail polish was dry, she carefully opened the plastic lid and poured the screws inside into an old paint tray until she uncovered what she was searching for, a metal cigarette container. Although Mom thought Mr. Carson had quit smoking, he had simply become more cautious. It seemed everyone in the house had something to hide, except for Mom. Mia opened the tin, took out a cigarette, then replaced it and buried the tin under the screws before putting it back on the shelf. Retreating to the bathroom, she turned on the fan and took the lighter tucked in the drawer along with the emergency candles. She lit the cigarette. Perching sideways on the counter above the sink, she stretched her legs out until they touched the wall. Staring into the mirror, Mia admired the reflection of the pretty young girl she saw there, particularly her slender legs, still thankfully free from the signs of manhood. Any stray hairs were quickly taken care of with Mom's razor. Bringing the cigarette to her slick lips, she inhaled gently, watching herself in the mirror. For some time now, she had been captivated by the image of a beautiful girl with colored lips pursed around a cigarette. The fact that the girl in the mirror was her only enhanced the allure. Turning her head, she blew the smoke directly at the fan, which pulled it outside. She paused to observe the cigarette butt, tinged pink from her lipstick. Mia smoked nearly the whole cigarette before she finally heard the front door close. Hannah was finally home. Quickly, she flushed the remnants down the toilet and sprayed air freshener to mask the smell before heading to the door. As Mia stepped out, Hannah was already coming up the stairs. "What took you so long?" "I was starting to worry." Hannah's expression was one of shock, as if she had been repeatedly slapped. "Let's go downstairs and talk." Once they settled in the living room with the curtains drawn, Hannah folded her hands in her lap, looking as if she wished the world would open up and swallow her whole. "Amber won't be coming around anymore." Mia's annoyance faded away as she placed her arm on Hannah's shoulder, reversing their roles from 3 years prior. Now, Mia was the one offering comfort, while Hannah appeared frightened. After Hannah cried her grief out on Mia's shoulder, she ventured to ask what had happened. She said if I wanted to go to the spring dance with Derek Mason, she wouldn't stop me, but I had to choose. Gently stroking Hannah's hair as she rested her head against Mia's chest, Mia murmured, "I'm sorry." While Hannah sobbed, Mia reflected on the situation. As Hannah began to realize she might like guys after all, she had sought acceptance from her girlfriend, only to receive the exact opposite. That day, Mia understood the power of truth and the value of a polite lie. She vowed that if Steve ever wanted to marry, she would ensure she stayed out of the picture. Samuel jolted awake with a start, warm water splashing around him, some spilling onto the bathroom floor of the hotel. It took him a moment to orient himself. He had dozed off in the bath after a long day of preparing for Mia's dinner with his soon-to-be ex-wife. As he drifted in and out of sleep, he had dreamt about the upcoming dinner. In his dream, Rebecca arrived with her new boyfriend, bringing him along to mock her ex-husband. Chaos ensued when Rebecca ripped the wig from Mia's head, forcing him to flee, caught between personas, half Steve, half Mia. The entire restaurant chased after him, laughing at the freak on the run. Lying back, Samuel let the water wash over his face, realizing he had definitely read too many stories online lately. Many ended with scenarios where the woman completely emasculated the unfortunate crossdresser. As he climbed out of the tub and dried himself off, he reassured himself that it was just his nerves playing tricks on his subconscious. Once dry, he dusted his body with a scented powder, marveling at the smoothness thanks to a salon visit recommended by Rebecca. Samuel had never been waxed before, and now that he had, he didn't quite understand why movies made such a big deal about it. The slight pain was worth the seductive smoothness of his legs. He headed into the main room, where he had laid out his afternoon purchases. Perhaps it was fortunate that Rebecca had never accepted Mia. With the kind of money she earned, it would have been easy to become spoiled. She had given Samuel more money than he had ever spent on Mia before, which made him anxious about how important this meeting was to her. No sense worrying about what can't be avoided, he told himself as he began dressing for dinner. He started with a set of genuine silk lingerie, a black lace bra and panty set, complemented by a matching garter belt. His breast forms were still at home, but he made do with cheap substitutes from a costume shop. Slightly larger than what he usually used, he managed to squeeze them into the bra. By the time he put on the lingerie, Samuel had begun to think of himself as Mia again. The dress she had chosen was absolutely stunning, black and sleeveless, but modestly cut at the neckline. The ankle-length skirt featured a side slit, offering a delightful glimpse of leg. It fit Mia perfectly. The store owner had encouraged Samuel to try it on with all the padding before deciding on the style. Next, Mia donned her new wig. Having never been blonde before, she felt adventurous since Rebecca had provided enough money for a high-quality wig. The style fell to her shoulders and was slightly feathered, offering a versatile look. It was long enough and expensive enough to style, but not so long that it restricted her options. For tonight, she left it down, which suited her new dress beautifully. Then Mia draped a cloth over her dress and opened the fabulous makeup selection she had acquired, all expertly matched to her skin tone and color preferences. She carefully selected each shade, applying every tip and trick she had learned from years of copying Hannah and reading countless women's magazines. The process of gradually erasing Samuel took a couple of hours, but by the end, Mia bore only a faint resemblance to her masculine alter ego. This wasn't to say she looked indistinguishably female, but recognizing her male self would be quite a challenge for anyone who didn't know both Samuel and Mia extremely well. Finally presentable, Mia called a taxi in her best feminine voice and made a last-minute inspection while she waited. Everything met with her approval, just a slight adjustment to the wig before she headed down to the lobby. She didn't have to wait long for the taxi to arrive. As she walked toward it, she listened to the click of her 3-inch heels on the sidewalk. The cab ride to the restaurant was pleasantly short, and thankfully, the driver didn't try to engage in conversation. During the ride, Mia felt her nerves returning. She knew the scenario from her dream was nearly impossible, but going as Mia to meet Rebecca was still a daunting prospect. Why was Rebecca so insistent that it had to be Mia? What could make it worth the hundreds of dollars she had spent to have Mia there? To distract herself, she checked her makeup again using a compact from her purse, passing the time until they arrived at the hotel. As Mia entered, she tried not to chew her lip in nervousness. The maitre d' smiled as she approached. Did she pass as a woman from a distance, or had he perhaps welcomed girls like her before? As she drew nearer, Mia decided it must be the latter, as his expression remained friendly. "Good evening, ma'am." "Party?" Mia took a deep breath, focusing on keeping her voice high and breathy to achieve the most convincingly feminine tone she could manage. "Carson, party of 2. The well-dressed gentleman quickly scanned his list, then checked it again. "I'm afraid I don't have a reservation under that name. Perhaps it's listed differently?" Mia felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "Relax, girl," she told herself, "try her maiden name before you panic." "Maybe under Greenwood?" The maitre d' searched his list again and paused his finger partway down the column. "Ah yes, here we are. Your companion hasn't arrived yet, but I'll have someone show you to your table." A young man in his mid-20s responded and led Mia to a table set for 2. Contrary to her expectations, it wasn't tucked away in a dark corner but rather near the center of one side of the restaurant. Though she caught a few odd glares of disgust, they were in the minority. Mia eased herself into the chair, smoothing her skirt before sitting and crossing her legs demurely, a gesture she had practiced countless times in the privacy of her home. She had only been in public 3 times before, once at a Halloween party where such things were expected, and the other times at a local GLBT club. Being in neutral territory made her feel more than a little nervous, and she found herself craving a cigarette despite having quit 10 years ago. Finally, Rebecca arrived, dressed in a stunning deep blue gown, cut lower in the front than Mia's and adorned with sparkles on the bust. Amid their conflicts over the past couple of years, Mia had forgotten just how beautiful Rebecca truly was. Rebecca slid into the chair opposite Mia, mirroring her earlier gesture but doing so with a natural ease and grace that seemed almost effortless. Their waiter took their order for a bottle of Chablis and left them to consider their dinner choices. Mia didn't look at her menu right away, her gaze was fixed on Rebecca's face. Despite her beauty, there was a deep sadness in her eyes. Mia took some comfort in the absence of anger and hatred that had been present in 2002. "Hello, Rebecca." Rebecca took a deep breath and swallowed hard. Her voice was weary, nearly cracking as she replied, "Hello, Mia. Nice to finally meet you." Silence settled between them, neither knowing what to say. Nothing seemed appropriate to Mia. Eventually, she picked up her menu, and they remained quiet until the waiter returned with their wine and took their dinner orders. Rebecca was the first to break the silence, her voice steady yet hollow. "So, how long have you known Samuel?" Mia sipped her wine. "It started when Samuel was a young boy. It was Hannah who introduced us." The story unfolded, and once she began, Mia couldn't stop herself. She shared everything, how she hadn't faded away when Hannah's interest in women waned and how Samuel had expected that Rebecca would replace Mia after their marriage. She described the beautiful outfits and sexy lingerie she had seen Rebecca wear and how much she longed to wear them herself. Then she recounted the day when everything became overwhelming and she finally gave in to temptation, going to a department store to buy an entire outfit. Though it had been challenging to keep Rebecca from noticing the money missing, it felt liberating, allowing her to feel free again after a long time. As Mia wrapped up her story, the waiter brought their dinner. Once he left, both women focused on their meals, unsure how to proceed. Mia had never eaten in public while dressed as a woman before, so she was overly cautious, perhaps trying too hard to apply her daintiest manners. Finally, breaking the silence, Rebecca said, "I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing by asking you here." "I'm still not." Rebecca regretted her words as soon as they left her mouth, cutting herself off with a sip of wine. As she set her glass down, Mia's gaze fell on the imprint of lipstick on Rebecca's glass, noticing the identical mark on her own, a similar shade. "Why did you want to meet me tonight?" Rebecca reached for her wine again, but Mia gently placed her hand on Rebecca's, holding it to the table. "Rebecca?" Taking a deep breath and holding it for a moment before exhaling, Rebecca replied, "I wanted to know you. You said it yourself, Samuel expected you to go away once he and I were married, but you were too significant a presence in his life for him to dismiss." "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," Mia interjected. Rebecca was close to tears now. "I don't know if it would have made a difference. I still would have made Samuel choose between us. I couldn't accept this in a husband." Mia looked down at her food, wanting to avoid seeing the tears welling in Rebecca's eyes. "So we've met. Now what?" "I couldn't have Samuel as my husband, but maybe Mia and I can be friends?" Surprise jolted Mia's gaze back to Rebecca's face, just in time to see her wipe away a tear. "That is, if you can forgive me," Rebecca added with a hopeful smile, tugging at the corners of her mouth. Now Mia's eyes began to well with tears. "I would be lucky to have a friend like you." With that, a weight that had built over the years lifted from both of them. "Now let's finish this dinner before it gets cold." The following day, before Samuel boarded his bus back to Edmonton, they visited a notary public to finalize the divorce papers. In a rather unusual show for a divorce, both of them smiled. When Rebecca extended her hand for a handshake, Samuel wrapped his arms around her instead, embracing his now ex-wife. "Thank you," he murmured. "I expect an invitation to the wedding," Rebecca replied. "How about as the maid of honor?" "For who?" They both erupted into giggles, laughing together all the way out.